Hello, and welcome to the Stacking Dingers Show. I'm your host, Matthew, aka Sheep, aka Dark Sheep, and you are here for your home for all things best ball, MLB best ball, focus on Underdog, maybe some DraftKings this year. We'll see what happens. Uh, Tonight, we are discussing early takeaways from bullpen drafts. ADP is starting to do a little bit of stabilizing, and people are already starting to get their player takes in. We'll be looking through this uncertain draft landscape as on this episode tonight. Hopefully, offer some insights to help you feel confident in your early drafts. And tonight, we are joined by still new guest host, or not guest host, co-host, analyst, whatever you want to call it. We got Billy Jones. How are you tonight?
Good. Yeah, no, it's good to take a week away from like computers and work and still drafted, but it was just good to have a Thanksgiving break. So, but I'm glad to be back and talking MLB baseball.
Yes, we are. We are excited. I got 10 drafts in so far. A couple slows that actually sped through pretty fast, and otherwise, I guess eight fast drafts. Where are you at?
I got two fast done, five or six slows, just kind of like I'm working my way through. I try to not just jam them all at once because I do like to have different parts of the draft that I'm working through and not just be like the same. Like
Yeah,
I'm now in the 14th round, and these are really boring picks. Not necessarily boring picks is the wrong word, but um, not as fun names as you get to in the first. So I try to stagger them.
yeah. So I guess that's a quick segue. Are you more of a slow drafter then?
No, not really. I do think that there is an advantage when it comes to fast drafting and knowing the board, but I don't know the board right now. And I don't know which avenues I have at the back of the draft when I miss it in some way or so on. And it's the back of the draft where I feel less comfortable. I know which players fit best ball scoring, and the profiles that I look for really in the front of the draft because all those are just household names. But so it's really kind of solidifying how I finish my drafts, and that's I always kind of use a couple sows at the beginning of the season to get myself together.
Okay. Yeah. I mostly fast also with, sometimes I'll throw a few slows in if I know I have a week of, nothing else going on really. No work commitments or anything. And that way I can, sometimes always be on the clock. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Like you said, it's hard to know the board right now. There's a lot of thinking about this year, comparing it to last year, which is going to be the kind of the main meat of our discussion today. We're going to go through a ton of players that are risers and fallers compared to last year, um, and try and get you out there a little bit comfortable with these people. Obviously, you're not going to agree with all of our takes on these guys, whether they're worth the rise or worth scooping on the fall. But we'll give our ideas, at least give a perspective where we're coming from, um, and yeah, I mean the good thing is nobody else, everybody's in the same boat in these drafts, so we're not super far behind most people.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I want to talk about today is like not necessarily we'll have some takes for sure, but just why did that player go up from why was he undrafted last year and why is he a third round pick this year? It's there's just a reason that they wasn't expected playing time and they now like a core ace or something like that. So um, I think that's I'm excited to kind of just process all of that and what has happened in the last 365 days since we were drafting last. Well, less than that, but last year.
Yes, yeah. So before we get into the risers and fallers, let's pull up. We have I grabbed. Let's. Oop, don't want to leave the studio. That's the wrong button. We have I have a draft board here that I pulled sort of just randomly out of my bullpen drafts from last year. Cut off the names. I actually don't even. I looked at a handful of boards in this one. I don't even remember which one. I think
Yeah.
I didn't want to exaggerate or something. And I took one that I got like 10th place or something in.
Yeah. I'm glad that we're doing this because in last week's conversation, we threw a ton of numbers out there on this is the best way to draft, but we didn't even look at what people were actually doing and what that like looked like. Because some people like we use a bunch of visuals, but like just visually seeing a draft board is so helpful too. So
Absolutely.
I this is like if you're listening to the audio, definitely jump over to YouTube and like take a look at this screenshot and compare it to what you see today. And it looks, I mean, it's more purple up top than you see um, in our current market, and that's really obvious when you see two in the second round and a lot in the third.
Yeah. And piggyback on what you're saying, if a lot of times people ask if they're just like brand new to the format, the best thing is just to do a couple of drafts and then like dive into content and all the numbers and stuff, because like you said, maybe you're throwing away a few bucks, but you're seeing these, you're getting a feel for um, where players are going and what other people are doing. Right now, most of the people drafting are, you know, enfranchised players to say the least. So there's going to not be a lot of like complete deviation from norms. So you can at least get a feel of other teams, and you can page through everybody's team at the end and kind of put together, maybe reverse engineer how they got those decisions if you can come up with that at all. Um, because yeah, I do have another draft board here from this year. Uh, and as like you said, the key thing is the purple. I did grab this one just to from this year to highlight a strategy that we don't recommend from the numbers and what that looks like. We can get into that a little bit later, but these first 3 rounds, you see a lot less purple than before. I guess this one even more so than probably other draft boards you're seeing this year because of this person. But just this shove up of the purple last year is fairly obvious.
Yeah, and if you go to the one that you said is just very clearly, it says Billy Jones. What you talked about last week, I disagree. And we'll see what happens at the end of the year, bud. But like, I just don't feel like that's going to work. Reference last video, if you're curious as to why that's the case.
Yeah,
But
yeah, and specifically we're
yeah.
talking about here this 4 pitcher start. I've seen multiple Skeens Scooble starts
Mhm.
on their own. This is even more exaggerated with the followed by Wheeler and Cease, and then 3 infielders. So this person's, as you scroll down, got an outfield of Cody Bellinger, Parker Meadows, TJ Friedel, Jesus Sanchez, Heston Kierstead, and Matt Vierling. So you're banking on superstar Parker Meadows uh, to carry your team. Like that's the potential upside guy in here that like even carries your outfield.
Yeah, Cody Bellinger is like your anchor. Like it just doesn't feel the way. Like if you look, that's where if you're gonna do a draft, look at some of the other people what they're doing, kind of like how they built out their still powerhouse pitching rooms, but weighted a little bit. You're not gonna have to chase stars. Um, yeah.
Anything else on? I guess for me, 2023 is just really about the pitcher difference. We do see first round slightly different. This was pretty much all year long, even into the main contest, as the 10 outfielders off the board in a row. That was kind of ubiquitous throughout the whole season. But it's a little bit different this year. But we still see. I guess. Now that I'm looking at it, you see this round 3 is kind of full of outfielders, and round 2 is pretty full as it was last year. But um, outfield cost has gone up again. I guess that makes sense in the vacuum. The vacuum that's left by pitching moving down, something has to move up, and in this case, outfielders have risen even higher.
Yeah, and it's at what point does it become too thin, or you just kind of got to get your guys and move on, um, and then like kind of just like take your lump that it's going to be weaker. I really also feels like the fourth round infielders like Pete Alonso, Trey Turner, Austin Riley, those guys at the top of the fourth round are really awesome. And the data that I kind of or the way that I drafted last year was 0 through pitchers through 5, and that was just I just like kind of like I just that was the rule, and then I kind of flexed that harder, or I kind of really cut it at the fifth round and started drafting there, or the sixth round and started drafting there. But like the fifth round and in the fourth round this year, those guys are like premium level arms. So
Yeah.
I'm going to be I'm not going to just cross that off this year as a way I'm going to draft, but I'm going to be very particular with which guys I'm going to look at and so on. I know that we have hopes to get someone who's knowledgeable about pitching to chat about pitchers. If you're one of those guys, please message us because we can do our best, but we'd love to get someone who's real detailed in that. But I think if there's going to be a guy in that range that is just awesome, that's and is going to run away with it. May not be all of them. So if there's 4 or 5 or 6 arms in that range being drafted, it may be only one of them, but there'll be a guy that's just spectacular from that range.
I think, with the exception of the health risk of Jacob deGrom, this group, even if they're not awesome, they're going to get you spike weeks. They're going to, pending health on all of them, but this group is definitely worthwhile investing in. And we didn't really say it last show, but when it came time to the final round of playoffs, and we'll get into building for playoff rounds in a later episode, but it's important to know that, like Zach Wheeler, which let's go back to last year, he was drafted in the 4th round. He was a pretty big key to some of the teams at the top of the leading board in the final playoff round. So these guys can, while we talk about the numbers not separating, they can be very beneficial. And I'm with you.
It was Snell too in like an earlier rounds of the playoffs. That was guy you kind of had to have, or you really had to chase in a different way. So it's this push pull of these. They're not going to. Premium pitchers don't separate across the season, but in an individual week, when they get 2 starts and they're pitching the way that they can, they really do separate.
Yep. Exactly. All right, so let's pop over into we got now the rankings on Underdog up here, and we're gonna just kind of hit some of the players that we've noticed or that you've noticed through the miracle of spreadsheets and data, rather than my gut feel and looking at old boards. We have a pretty big list of guys that are risers and fallers. So we're going to kind of break this down into round by round, or not groups of rounds. So we're talking round 1 through 3. I guess I don't know. What do you think? We didn't really talk about this. What do you think? Maybe this is still just a better view looking at this draft board for
Yeah,
these
let's just
guys.
look. We'll just do the draft board. We have our other sheet that we can just kind of like pick the guys off of. Um, so let's just start with the trio of names that we want to start our conversation with, and we'll call it like the premium infielders that are being listed in the first round. Bobby Witt, Ellie De La Cruz, Gunnar Henderson, and Mookie Betts. Each of those not necessarily aligned with where they were last year. First off, Mookie Betts was not an infielder last year.
Yep.
So that is something that is to reconfigure the math when you could think about what he did last year in relation to this tournament and what he's going to be doing for you this year. Just you'd be like, well, he was drafted fourth. It's not the same. But so way it was drafted last year was Bobby Witt was drafted like there's a infield 2 or infield 3 at the 1-2 turn right after the wall of infielders, and he's still drafted at the top of the infielders, but now it's drafted in like the early to middle of the first round.
Yep.
Ellie De La Cruz and Gunnar Henderson had mega years and are now drafted in the first round, and Mookie Betts kind of just like finishes off that group at the back of the first round.
Yeah, last year you could build some nice. If you built a, outfielder plus Ellie plus Gunner team, that was possible for a lot of the year, and that was a really nice build to get overall scoring. Yeah, we have. It's interesting to me, at least. We have this this group of young guys that have pushed down the last year it was Bryce Harper, Matt Olson, Jose Ramirez. He's still there at the 1-2 turn, but those guys were kind of solidified there at the 1-2 turn. But now, just based on, I guess it's simply just what we saw. Last year we saw these guys score. We saw what they could do, and the season that with just like the overall, in Roto 5, it's not a 5 category guy here, but he's scoring in every way possible for you as a hitter: steals, home runs, doubles, triples. He's compiling, and even in the great categories, he's scoring.
Yeah, he does it all. I mean, all of these guys do like hit for power, not necessarily run as much for Gunnar Henderson, but they're just in this format, big totals and spikes.
Yep. So right now, I have not dabbled in any of these guys. To be honest, I've been, fairly outfield build, as one might say, and I've been still just doing a lot of two outfielder starts, or an outfield, infield, outfield. So I'm not getting to them a lot. I also haven't had too many late picks yet to really have that decision.
Yeah, and I think that's fair from a structural perspective. I also do see that these guys are potentially. It's tough to be like, I want no Gunnar Henderson in my portfolio, and
Right.
but then the schedule comes out and they play in course or something like that, and you're just like, well, I need that if I'm going to win, or if he just hits a bunch of home runs, and any of these guys could do that. But how this is why I'm like, if I'm going to, I like my slows early, because if I'm going to start infield heavy early, I got to know what out my outs earlier to outfield or outs later to outfield.
I don't have the source for this. This is one of those scrolling on social media things, but I did see that the schedule this year is pretty not complementary to Coors. There's not a lot of long homestands in Coors. So maybe we'll get into a schedule episode, but that is something, I don't know, it just popped into my head when you mentioned Coors. So yeah, then we have the next group we want to talk about, Skeens and Scooble. Skeens was going in the 18 through 20, depending on when you were drafting. Not ADP, but round, 18 to 20 round. And then
Borderline
Scooble,
undrafted.
yeah, some often undrafted. And Tariq Scooble was going in round 6 or so last year. And I feel like this happens year over year. The best pitcher from the previous year just gets jacked up. Like Strider, Cole, the previous year. It just, people see these guys that look like they can separate, and everybody's excited about it. So they get pushed up. And don't get me wrong, these guys should be the guy. I think from what we saw last year, these are the two guys that should be up here. Between youth and skills and potential volume for this year, there's no reason that they shouldn't be. It's just, what are we giving up to take them?
Yeah, and your premium picks, where they're going right now, like, which is, are they worthy of that? And I think so the top guys have changed in the last several years, and part of it's just injury. Like Garrett Cole missed last year, Strider missed last year. Both those guys at their peak, probably. Cole's right back there, and Strider would be right there if we thought he was going to get a full season. I think that my takeaway was that you had these two absolute horses that weren't drafted at the top, that are now being drafted there. So it's pitching is viable much later in the drafts. Garrett Crochet, who we're going to talk about a little bit later, largely undrafted as well. So pitching is one of those things where if you have those insights, like there's a lot of edge to be had.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Yes, it's great to have these guys up at the top, and you think they're worth it, but the person that's more worth it is the guy who's going to make that jump for next year.
Mm-hmm.
The guy that's going to be competing in these first few rounds that we were drafting later. I mean, even Snell from a couple of years ago, or Dylan Cease. Those guys both have put in good seasons inside, kind of like the more variant seasons that they've had just based on the type of pitcher they are. And now, we see them up here. So it's identifying, this year's, I don't think we're going to have this year's Paul Skeens, but this year's Tariq Scooble or this year's Chris Sale. And those are the guys that are going to be more valuable this year than, or likely to be more valuable this year than getting those guys now this year. I don't know if that made sense, but getting this year's Chris Sale is going to give you better value than taking Chris Sale this year, even if he has a really good season.
Yeah, for sure. You got there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So those are two young star pitchers that are up at the top of the draft board that weren't there last year, but rightfully belong there. Some other guys that had big years last year were the two, had to have them outfielders.
Mm-hmm.
Jaron Duran and Brent Rooker. Those are both double-digit rounds last year. Duran 10 and Rooker 15. So these were guys that really got a heavy boost from last year's productions. Is it like a lot of chasing what happened last year, or is there, if they kind of just land somewhere in the middle, we're overdrafting them this year? That's that was my snap reaction for both of these guys. I was a heavy Rooker buyer last year. That was my dude. I'm guy hits the ball far. Let me draft him.
Yeah.
And so that worked out well. But so is like look at the guys he's being drafted around. There's some like superstars, and that's where I was like, they feel really expensive now, especially when my like where I'm like kind of pinning to last year.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say at this point, I haven't taken either this year because that's my initial reaction, but that's definitely one in my bank. I think I've looked at Jaron Duran's Fangraphs page at least 3 or 4 times already. Each draft, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
this doesn't feel right, but maybe it is. So I'm not ready to make a call on. I know people really want wishy-washy waffling right now, but I'm just personally not in a place to decide. I just will say that I haven't taken them at all.
Yeah, and like Duran, I'm struggling with because he's got the stolen bases part of his profile, and like that doesn't translate as much to um, best ball. Whereas Brent Rooker is a power guy, and that really translates from a spike week perspective. So like, what I have clicked the Rooker um, button one time, but it's again, it doesn't feel as good as it did last year when I was like, okay, if I miss, it's not going to be that bad, and when I hit, it's going to be really impactful.
Yeah. So I'm sure I'll get there at some point on really why I'm in or out on those guys. But we have one more group of guys here in the first 3 rounds we wanted to call out, and that is the sophomore quintuple. I don't know. Jackson Churio, uh, Wyatt Langford, Jackson Merrill, and James Woods have all pushed their way up from different places in the draft board last year into the second and third round. So like Churio, about round 8 last year. Langford was about round 6. Jackson Merrill was not actually even in the player pool. And James Woods, I'm not sure if where he was going, but it was very late, and borderline undrafted.
Yeah, I believe it was Jackson Merrill and Wood were not in the player pool last year. I could be
Okay,
wrong.
Wood wasn't either. I can't.
Yeah, and those are guys that it was uncertain if or how much they were going to contribute to the season, like to the big leagues.
Yeah,
And when they did, they popped off, and now we're seeing them being drafted very highly. Um, yeah, Langford and Churio saw a lot more run in the big leagues. Both did very well, and Langford had some level of disappointment, but did have like kind of like the explosions late. And Jackson Churio is just kind of like a stud. You can talk about him as your hometown boy, right?
yeah,
But I think that's an interesting group this year, as there's definitely been like a. I've heard that there's like your second year in the major leagues, you kind of get figured out a little bit, and so I'm curious if that's going to be a component of their year.
yeah. I'm really surprised that Trio's that far ahead of the other guys. I mean, we're talking relative here, but he's going ahead of these like big name anchor infielders and like Vlad and Matt Olson, Bryce Harper, Corey Seager, Rafael Devers, Ketel Marte. We'll get to him in a second. But it's pretty crazy to me that he's going ahead of those. But I think we've seen people want the young upside. Like there's not as much doubt in best ball players' minds because of the game that we're playing. People want to make these high upside bets.
Yeah, and it's like the miss is somewhat accepted as it's just like a component of best ball. So if they hit at that, then it doesn't matter. So yeah, it is like you have these very proven names. Having him go ahead of Matt Olson and Bryce Harper just kind of blows my mind. like,
Yeah.
what are we doing here? Those guys are superstars, but positional scarcity plus the opportunity that Jackson Churio is eighth next year is possibly there.
Yeah, I guess I'm not completely sold on him having the power output to really put him up into first round contention next year. Whereas I think Langford and Merrill both have a little bit more of the pure power upside. Langford especially, that if they either of those guys get hot, um, we could be drafting them first round next year. Um, because I mean, yeah, like you said, Langford had a great September, and Merrill was good all year long. Like he didn't have any holes in his game, and you talk about the second year, um, maybe finding some holes in his approach at the plate, but I find it hard to believe that just because of how consistent he was all year long, that's really in the cards for him. All right, so then we do have some fallers. You kind of mentioned them here, in Bryce Harper and Matt Olson. And then if we look a little bit further to pair with those guys, we have, look down into round 4. Austin Riley and Trey Turner are two guys that were stacked a lot with their teammates last year in these first couple 1-2 turn, or sometimes Trey was falling a little bit, but these like known quantities that kind of had slightly down years are sliding because of it.
Yeah, and then fallers is relative term here. These guys are being drafted still very highly. I think I just wanted to note with like Julio Rodriguez last year was drafted with the premium level outfielders, and now he's being drafted in the top of the second round. And I just feel like while there was a down year last year, I think that's interesting for someone who's still very young.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you had these two offenses, the Braves and the Phillies were really expensive last year. They're still very expensive, but there's a little bit of a discount on that this year, and not a ton has changed. Realistically, they're both going to be great offenses and still core components of those offenses. So I thought those were just a little disappointing seasons last year, but not really much has changed from the profile and what we expect them to do.
Yeah, and Bryce and Freddie and Matt Olson are kind of all similar, maybe just because they all play first base. But I kind of think of them all similar, and they all are worth it here. I've personally, I don't know if it's just where I've been drafting from more often, but I've been getting a lot of Matt Olson. Like Judge Matt Olson feels like a great start because Matt Olson's only 30 years old, and like I don't expect the decline compared to. I mean, Freddie's 35 at this point, so I know he's Freddie Freeman, and he's probably going to be just fine this year. But we're starting to get to that point where we got to start thinking about the age on the upper side for some of these guys.
Yeah, for sure. So do you want to move on to a little bit we'll call it the middle-ish round of the draft, or the next tier?
Yeah. So let's scroll down a little bit here. Right now, our next group is about round 4 through 6. And we do have a group of risers, of outfielders from, kind of opposite ends of the spectrum here. Ian Happ and Riley Green, both like round 6, round 7 guys that have moved up here into round 4. Ian Happ was a huge target of mine last year. He's just been a consistent guy that puts up power weeks and accumulates even when he's not hitting for power. And Riley Green was, one of the sophomore targets I had last year, and I was taking him often where he was going. I do wonder on him how much the playoff run has pushed him up from where he was, because it's not like he really had a super outstanding season, and he did miss some time. So I do wonder if that playoff run is affecting people in that decision.
Yeah, it's like there's a youth component there, or potential upside that we love as a community. There's a good finish, and then a position that has just gotten so thin that when you combine all of these things together, he becomes picked at the 42nd overall slot. And guys like him are going to be one that we'll have probably a lot of conversation about this year. But it's just like Ian Happ, I feel like it's like very, very solid. Okay, that's just can take the guy and move on to your next pick and be happy with that as a component of your team. And I think Riley Green, it's not the same conversation.
True. I think actually a similar conversation going a few rounds later here is actually not another youth that has a little more MLB experience in Spencer Steer, a little bit better of an offensive environment that he plays in. Let's see, he is in the 6th round or so right now, and he was drafted about round 11 last year. So I think actually there's probably some similarities more in the Green and Steer case. But I will say all three of these guys, you have a ton of stack options also later in the draft. And you can see whoever did this here did the Spencer Steer McLean combo. And then there's various high upside like Melvin Marte and Christian Encarnacion and Strand later that you can put together a Cincinnati stack.
Yeah, and Steer's one that when I just looked at the steamer projections, stood out as like one that's like pretty expensive. But then you build in the narrative, younger player, great ballpark, and so on. It's like you can see how that gets there.
Yeah. I guess we shouldn't rule out the other young guy, Lawrence Butler here. Actually, I don't know how old he is. Yeah, he's 24, same age as Riley Green. Kind of more out of nowhere than Riley Green. He was basically undrafted last year. I'm having a tough time getting to Lawrence Butler. Maybe that's just a bias because of I didn't have a concept of him before this year. But I'm having a hard time buying that jump.
Yeah, he's one of those guys I'm gonna actually have to watch play this year because it's like you don't get a ton of the A's.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious, how is that new stadium gonna play this year?
Oh yeah, I've not really seen any breakdowns. I still haven't seen any breakdowns. I've seen breakdowns on the Tampa Bay or the single A stadium they're going to play in, because we know that that stadium specifically is the same dimensions as the Yankee Stadium on purpose. So we kind of have an idea of the lefty guys that we want to target in that. But I haven't seen anything for the Sacramento stadium that the A's are going to play in.
Yeah, this is Major League Baseball here. We got to be better than this. And then we're about to have the golden at-bat rule where you can just show up and have anyone hit at any time. So is Juan Soto going to hit twice in a row now?
Hey, Billy,
are we going to ghost runner?
It's been nice having you on the show, Billy. I didn't tell you ahead of time, but anybody that brings up the golden hitter rule is officially banned from the program here on out.
Noted. Everyone hear that.
I'm not giving it the time of day. We've already given it more time than I've even wanted to give it. So we're moving on. We're moving on to some infielders from my my Brewers team last year. That core that kind of drove us to the playoffs. William Contreras, Willie Adames. Contreras here round 5, round 6 for Adames about. And they were both going 10, 11. 2 huge targets last year for me. And because I just thought the upside was there. We saw it. I was excited by it. And now I think they're probably going, around the guys, around the area they probably should be. We can maybe pencil in Willie Adames into LA playing for the Dodgers. Like that's like, if that happens, he's going to be up a couple more rounds. If we get that landing spot, he's going to drive up. Contreras, I think, is probably going to sit here. He still has a tiny bit of playing time risk. Part of why we loved him last year was his ability to DH based on the Brewers roster construction, and that hasn't gone away. But 2 years of heavy usage on a catcher is kind of a pink flag in terms of the year after year of heavy usage. Like it wears down on catchers pretty quick. We saw JT Realmuto just kind of fall off last year. So like that potential risk is there. I think if he's fine and he can stay healthy, he has every chance at every at bat for the Brewers again this year.
Yeah, I've never heard the term pink flag. So it's not a full red flag.
Not a full red flag.
It's just a pink flag.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. You got it.
See? Okay, but Contreras is great, and I think something I want, like a catcher that is a bat, and we typically will knock a catcher in this format because of just raw at bats and plate appearances that you're not going to get if you need to miss 1 day a week. But when he doesn't fit that role for this team, he needs to be a part of the lineup every single day. So when he's not catching, he's in the lineup, and making that a core component of who he is as a part of the team. Like that was why he was so valuable. I'm really curious as to port that same kind of profile, catchers that we kind of knock them for being catchers that might get opportunities at first base or DH, and think about who could be this year's Contreras. It's something I wrote down as a part of this exercise, like who can do this, what other opportunities, if they break the right way, is this year's William Contreras.
So the obvious one is Contreras, Wilson Contreras. He is
Contreras, Wilson Contreras.
Wilson Contreras is one of my early targets. He is going, I guess he's round 15 here, but basically we've already had St. Louis come out and say that he is going to be first base DH this year. They have Ivan Herrera and Pedro Paez. I think that's his name. But they have 2 guys at catcher that can catch. Ivan Herrera is actually a decent hitter also, and they are committing to playing their young guys this year outside of Wilson Contreras, who's going to fill in that Paul Goldschmidt shaped hole at first base.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really have a young guy that I know of that is going to be competing for that playing time. So that's I guess that's my catcher. The other catcher I'll throw out here is Yainer Diaz. I think the bat is there that, depending on how the Astros roster breaks, He might be in line. I don't know that they have another catcher. They could bring in somebody, but just the bat is so good for him that he's a guy I want to get some of with that potential upside.
Yeah, absolutely. Writing those names down. Thank you.
um, our pitching risers here. We talked about Chris Sale. Uh, the what if he's healthy this year case came through. Chris Sale won the Cy Young. Maybe even kind of undervalued right now if we're thinking about these, maybe by a round, comparing him to these other guys. If he does it another year like last year, then you're going to want to have him.
Yeah, and you want Sale when he's cheap, and you don't want him when he's expensive. And so last year was the year. But the market still acknowledges that he is older, he is injury prone, and if as you said, you could make the argument that he sits at the front of this, like I'll call second tier of pitchers, not the middle or back. But he was that big mid to late round winner. If you had him on your team, your pitching staff was able to go punch for punch with anyone else that built a pitching staff last year. And now we see him being drafted highly.
Yep. Speaking of injury prone, right next to him in this draft is Jacob deGrom. Barely drafted last year. Some people tried to sneak him in. They thought, some of the timetable as they were saying it towards the end of spring training, it was like lining up that maybe he's there in the playoffs and you want him. And it was actually pretty close when he came back. It was kind of like after the playoffs are done. So that definitely could have broke differently last year if you were one stashing deGrom. I'm not a fan of long-term injury stashes like that, but if you're doing it, could have worked maybe last year. And right now, Steamer has a ridiculous innings.
There's no way that number's right.
Yeah, so let me pull it up.
I will
here
take
quick.
that under.
Steamer has 156 innings for Jacob deGrom, and if that happens, you're going to be very happy. I think that you drafted him here.
Mm-hmm.
I need to do a little more digging on the rotation potential in Texas. That kind of, they lost Scherzer, and they never really had Scherzer last year, but it is a little bit in flux, and some of the young guys stepping in there, and some of the guys that held like the Cody Bradfords that held that together last year. But Texas paid a lot of money for Jacob deGrom and are going to pay a lot of money. So can they push him? Sure. It's just like, what's his body going to do? Some stuff already. I was just perusing some stuff. His stuff rankings, his pitch rankings. Did not have the velocity of peak, which kind of seems to be expected. So some of his effectiveness could be gone, but just like a total boomer bust potential here for deGrom.
It's a big risk, and the way that pitching is priced now, it's not like the fifth round is pitcher 15. It's like pitcher 5. So you're really giving up a lot to get that high risk. The last riser, go ahead.
I agree, but looking at what you can build with them right now because of the shift, like this deGrom, Lopez, Gallen, Alcantara, Free, you're taking on this rotation has infinite injury risk, but also infinite upside. Alcantara, Gallen, Free, deGrom, all coming off of various types of injuries and down, like surgeries and missed time. And but this, like 2 years ago, you had this rotation, you were happy. So
Yeah, completely agree.
I think, there is this group of pitchers, those guys, Shane McClanahan here, one of my, later loves of every year, Brandon Woodruff. Um, there's this group of guys that all have, well, depending on where, but third round upside, I think. Um, so these former aces that are working their way back from injuries are make like even Tyler Glass now to some extent. These guys like have potential to be really valuable this year, but also have potential to just flop.
They could be this year's sale.
Yeah, one of them could be.
Yeah.
It's so if you just put all of them on the same roster, you'll have one. You're guaranteed to have this year's sale, right? That's how that works.
Yeah, sure.
All right, yeah. So you did have one more pitching riser here you want to talk about.
Yeah, one last name from like a pitching riser perspective we can move through quickly. Just Garrett Crochet. And the note that I wanted to bring up here is immediately last year, you knew you wanted him on your teams, and you likely didn't have him and draft him. He was available in every draft, and after I think he started opening day and was
Yeah, he
just
did.
he was amazing.
Yep.
And so, but I think there, like, how do we get more exposed to pitchers like this that could have that potential that are in the pitcher pool? Um, is something that I wanted, as I was noting with this name.
Yeah. And thing that it got frustrating at the end how they were using him for inning starts here and there, but he got up to almost 150 innings last year, so he should be good to go. He lands on a good team in a trade, and he's going to be another riser, I think,
Mm-hmm.
even further than he already has. All right, so let's see. In this group, round 4 to 6, we got some fallers. I think I'm just going to name a. There's a big group here that have fallen from the early picks, um, just kind of based on performance reasons. So we got Pete Alonso, Luis Robert, Randy Rosarena, Ozzy Albies, Marcus Semien is in here, Adelis Garcia. So all of these guys were guys we were taking second, third round, and now just based on their previous season and slightly down years, I think. I guess we want to add Yelich and Trout here. So they're like Robert and Yelich and Trout, kind of all injury risk guys, but for the most part, all of the other guys had okay seasons. Like they all kind of feel like overreactions, but obviously, if we're pushing all these other people up, someone's got to fall. So I think this group is really interesting in terms of potential upside almost on all of them.
That was my takeaway as well. Is like I rattled off these names that they're all at cheaper prices, and then I went go through each of their profiles. I'm like, what is really different outside of like they did fine, like they did what you expected them to do. They didn't really impress, but they might have like been at or maybe slightly below expectation, but not enough to be like problematic here. And so it was just like if they have any sort of bounce back or if they just keep doing what they're doing, there's some great values in this list of names.
Yeah, and like just um maybe pull out a team here that took a couple of them. I guess I'm not seeing offhand, but uh the teams that you can build feel really good with these guys when you're taking them as your fourth or fifth non-pitcher pick. if you can take these guys, that it feels really good to me.
Yeah, and like Adolis Garcia is one of these names we've come back to. It's like last year he felt really expensive. It's like, ugh, is this worth it? No, it wasn't, because he does what we'd expect him to do, and now he bounces back to kind of roughly where it should go. Maybe it should be somewhere in between, but like big upside in power and is on a really good team, like or there's the potential for it to be a really good offense. So yeah, I yeah, this has been a very fruitful range for me.
Yeah, and he might have even been playing somewhat hurt last year too. So
Mm-hmm.
like, there's definitely that potential. He was, older breakout guy that had a lot of strikeouts. So I was never really he never really fit any profile that I was targeting. But I think now at this point, taking him here feels fine, especially if you're building a Texas stack, which you want to talk about year-to-year costs. Corey Seager's still up there, but you can build some nice Texas stacks because of their just overall down year last season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I liked building Texas last year. That was something that it kind of aligned. There were upside plays within the team. There was like core builds players you wanted to attack to, and those still kind of exist just 1 year later.
All right, let's move on here. We got a couple of pitchers on the list, but let's move on to some later rounds here and kind of do a little more rapid fire. We have a interesting group in round 7 and 9, maybe a little bit later. Yeah, it's 7 and 9 of guys that were basically undrafted last year. So we have Brenton Doyle, Colton Cowser, Mark Vientos, Jurickson Profar, Junior Caminero, Dylan Cruz, and Jason Dominguez in this group of guys that were undrafted last year. Most of them young outside of Jurickson Profar, but this group is really interesting in terms of what you think they're going to do this year. And I don't know if you have any specific one there that you want to highlight.
No, I think that Jurickson Profar is the name that I think stands out to me because it's like you said, young dude, young dude, young dude, all trending up, all trending up. Flash in the pan, like is Profar real? Like I don't know. I I have a feeling that he's there's like it was that was the anomaly and not the norm.
But I haven't taken him, but I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I would like it if he landed again in San Diego. Like that would give me a lot of confidence that they believe that at least it's somewhat repeatable, because they still have holes in their outfield. They need an outfielder, so I'd really like to see him go back there, and I think that offense has potential to be good. So I'd like to see that specifically, and then I don't know what to do with Caminero, Cruz, and Dominguez. To me, those guys are all more just. I'm not really taking any of them one off. They seem like stack partners to me, but I could be wrong there.
Yeah. Okay, some other names we wanted to talk about in this range. Some pitchers that went up in price, which there hasn't been a ton of them. Michael King's on there. Shota Imanaga's on there. What are your thoughts on those two?
If you go back to the last season, Shota was one of my top targets. He was sitting round 11 or later, depending on when you were drafting. And I think he pitched a little better than he we can expect, I guess. I think he does. I think he's great. I think he's going to be fine. I just don't. I'm not taking him here at this price. I think I like him still a couple rounds later. I'd prefer to have him.
Yeah, he was a great value last year, and what he's interesting compared to some of the other for like Japanese pitchers we've seen, and that's in the sense where he was a bit older when he came over, whereas Yamamoto is really young, Shohei Ohtani is really young, Roki Sasaki's really young. He was 30 last year, I believe, which I could see why a team's going to run him out for more extended innings as a more mature pitcher. Um, and so as well as there's a couple of analysts that thought he was really good. And so I had kind of piggybacked on that as well. He's one of my most drafted players.
Yeah, but I'm having an impossible time taking him over George Kirby, Framber Valdez, even Luis Castillo, who had a down year. Logan Webb, Freddie. This list of pitchers here, he's just behind them for me. So, unfortunately, not going to be there. I don't think much this year.
Yeah, it's a big chunk, and he's probably priced at his ceiling.
Right. I do think you do have a riser here in Taylor Ward. Let's see, he's round 8. He moved up about from around 11, and I still think he's a value here. So he's a guy I'm happy to take here. I think he should be more up with, like I say, a Suzuki. I think he has that bat in him.
And he if you do it like just in outfield order, say I think it's like four people different between him and Taylor Ward, and maybe in order that feels right, but it does feel like a lot of 14, 15 picks when you look at it on a visual board.
So I think we can easily attribute that to pitchers because this is now the pitcher portion of the draft. We are neck deep into where everybody is taking their pitchers. So you see the purple here is heavy, and I think that's a great point that they're close in outfield ranking, but because of the dynamics of how people are drafting and going to pitcher at this portion in the draft, while they might be similar in output, they're separated by more actual draft positions.
Yeah, this range of the draft is just like darker. Like then the top of the draft is a bunch of orange, and this one is just green and purple.
Yeah. So we do have a couple of guys in Bregman and Castillo here as fallers. Nick Castellanos, I guess he did get taken here early. He's not a faller so much. Maybe that is a mislabel here. Let's see. But I think Alex Bregman is an interesting infielder here in this group, depending on where he lands. We could see an increase on him. Also, Christian Walker. I think similar things on both these guys. I like Christian Walker better. I've been sort of theory crafting the Christian Walker to the Yankees build, so taking him with a Judge, it feels really nice. But I think both of those guys are going to contribute wherever they land and have regular playing time. Christian Walker, I think, has just a better upside.
Yeah, it's like I don't know who to draft these guys with, so I'll defer on it as part of both of these, as well as I don't know what it's like. There's at any level of uncertainty, even if that uncertainty could potentially be beneficial, is treated as bad for the most part in this market.
Right.
When it comes to not being on a roster, but like Christian Walker to the Yankees, that's like to the moon. I feel like is in terms of his ADP. So very intelligent by you to build those out, those Yankees rosters out.
And that's just bonus upside. He's
Mhm.
good wherever else he goes. All right, so as usual, we got about halfway through a list of names on a show that we wanted to get through. So let's just highlight. Um, there is a ton of late risers and fallers from the top 10 into the second half of the draft. I don't know, maybe we get these numbers out to people somehow somewhere else. Maybe I'll include the cells that you made by that in the tweets about the show. But we could go for a whole nother episode at this point on the second half of the draft board. But let's have a little fun here, and maybe we already mentioned them, but let's talk some of these guys that you are in and out on. So the both of us. Um, so one of your targets is Bryce Harper and the Phillies. And we kind of covered it, but do you have more to talk about on just the Phillies in general?
There's I like the Phillies because there's multiple ways to build the Phillies. I think Schwarber is just year over year misunderstood and how he translates to this this game. Like in best ball, home runs are king, and the fact that stolen bases are it's a nice to have. It's not a necessity to being successful, and it is not related to spikes. So I like drafting him. Bryce Harper is cheaper than last year. Trey Turner is cheaper than last year. There's just ways to get to that team that um, I like to as well as we talk Bregman. Bregman could go there, and that team gets better. There's just they're always kind of trying to improve. So I think that it's just a good offense to kind of build around.
Yeah, we've seen Alec Boehm trade rumors in this off season, and they definitely are in a place to add a decent name bat. The way that they build their team at this point, they might be in the market for that. I mean, I don't think Soto is on their list, but you know, somebody is. They're going to add somebody. Whereas I think last year we saw like no turnover, but I think that the way that they build that team is that they could add somebody too. Um, yeah, so I talked about Matt Olson, similar to Bryce Harper in the Phillies is Matt Olson and the Braves, who had a disappointing season last year, but really are primed to be just fine this year. Um, so yeah, I talked about Wilson Contreras was another one of my targets. I got a couple other late round bats. The other infielder for me is Tommy Edman, who just signed the 5-year deal with the Dodgers. He finally has a place on a team. I guess that's not true. The Cardinals, played him shortstop, outfield, but having him as super utility on the Dodgers, playing almost every day, depending on who needs rest, and what we saw in the playoffs, where they were batting him, fourth, fifth, sometimes if the lineup made sense. I just think he's a potential smash in like 19th round or so.
Yeah, if he gets as much volume in just plate appearances that it seems like it's going to be on what is look like the best team in baseball. That's just it's a win.
Yeah.
Or so yeah, I love that. I love that ball.
My outfielder, late round outfielder that I have like in half my team so far, is Jock Peterson, who just I don't know why he didn't get a boost from last year. I guess he's still technically, he's out on the free agent market. He's another year older. He's still just a strong side platoon bat, but he is a potential weekly smash. And if I can get a weekly smash as outfielder, as my sixth outfielder in the last round, it's hard to pass up.
Yeah, and we talk about Schwarber, and that's like Schwarber light, essentially, right? He's not going to play as much, but he hits home runs and he walks and he strikes out, and that's like what he does. But that works for us. And toss everything else out. Maybe the entire season that he does poorly. If he shows up at the right time, he's got the profile that can do it and do it in a big way.
And last year it wasn't a bad season. He was compiling the whole year and with the big weeks. So you have a pitcher on here on the list, and I'll let you talk about it. He's a guy that has killed me year over year. So tell me on 2024 Mackenzie Gore.
Yeah, so I think part of me is referencing one of my favorite analysts, Lance Brozdowski. I think that's how you say his name. As he recently put out a video on him about why he thinks he's realistically one tweak away from being a superstar, and kind of went through that in detail. And Lance was a major source of where I was getting detailed information last year. I think he is really sharp. And so I think Mackenzie Gore, where he's being drafted later and potential high upside, I think that in itself is something that's really interesting to me. But then also, like, I want to reference, like, when it comes to this space, like, you can take people that are not even trying to do anything for best ball and like pull these nuggets from them. And that's what I do with Lance, is like, he does it because he's like a pure baseball analyst, and I'm like trying to, like, okay, which players do you think are going to go great this year, and then port them over to this. So that's why I wanted to call out Mackenzie Gore.
Okay, and that's a good segue into what our plan for next week. We kind of a star-studded roster, a guest next week, which we'll kind of keep in the bag, but we got some really smart roto content creators that also dabble in Underdog that we're going to be talking to, just like specifically about that idea of using other information to get better at best ball. So that should be a fun one. That's a little tease there. Before we go, though, we do have fades. We gotta end on a negative note. We planned this well. So right now, I'm fading Ronald Acuna in the second round. It's hard to spend that draft capital on a guy that could be back, in June. It's just hard for me to do. I get why people are doing it, but I can't do it.
So I understand that, but how does that? Sorry to challenge you right away, but like, how does that directionally work with being a target on Matt Olson?
I'm just happy with other Braves too. Like,
okay,
Acuna coming back is a bonus to everyone on the team. So getting other Braves, I can capture that potential upside maybe. But that's a good challenge because I hadn't really considered that. Because getting Olson, Ozuna, or Olson Harris starts just feels nice, and then you can get LBs pretty cheap too. So, and I think there's another team that like can Jock go back there for a year. Can he sign a deal there? They have room. Well, I don't know about their spending. They're not. They seem to have been kind of trying to cut spending this last year. So maybe they don't have a huge move in, but I think there is some room there in that Kellenic Laureano role that they tried to piece together last year. Maybe they do something there.
Yeah. The Braves are they're very sharp when it comes to their contracts, getting ahead of it, and how they handle that. So we'll see what they do. And the fade that I wanted to talk about, and I could be totally wrong on this, is Roki Sasaki. And the reason I'm going to say that, I kind of referenced this earlier, is he's so young. And I struggle to see a team bringing him over as a part of their long-term future and running like 150, 180 innings this year. I feel like that would be negligent if they did that. And so if we're going to be shorter starts or missing starts or never 2 starts in a week, that's not going to translate as well to what we do here. So not saying I don't think that he is awesome, because I think he could be, but I just am hesitant that this year is going to be the year for him, especially saying he's not cheap relative to other pitchers and some of the names that he's going around.
Yeah, we talked about pink flag. No, there's red flags on him. Major upside potentially, but this year, and maybe you want to get ahead of it, but for me, he hasn't finished. He's had injuries in the last 3 seasons in Japan. He hasn't finished a full season. Just like too many red flags there. I'm totally with you. Between what his potential usage is on a MLB team and the injury stuff, yeah, I'm out there. And then I do want to highlight a couple of guys that have risen up that I don't understand it. So they kind of are similar to me in that they're really potentially accumulators. Neither of them hit for power at all, and that's Mason Wynn and Pete Crow Armstrong, 2 guys that I just do not understand their ADPs. I guess maybe we should have done that on this list, but PCA, the cover boy for the wrong reason on this show, is going in round 12, 144. He's going up against Kerry Carpenter and Tyler O'Neill, even somewhat JJ Bleday, like Buxton's there. Like these guys, they have spike week upside, and I just don't see that in Pete Crow Armstrong. Maybe I'm undervaluing the age there. And then Mason Wynn is similar. He's 133 in this draft that we had looked at. And he did accumulate a decent amount of points last year, but I just think that he is entirely replaceable in the later rounds. I'm not gonna take him in that area.
Yeah, both these guys run. I mean, you said you call it accumulating. Like, it's part of how they get their scoring is stolen bases, and it just doesn't translate to high end outcomes. So they may be getting points on a regular basis, but it's only 5 more points than the replaceable individual throughout the entire season. And they're never going to get to that big week. So it's like what Stephen Kwan. It's like he's just never, and he was good last year, but that he's even him being good last year, there's no true ceiling. And I struggle to see those true ceilings with these 2 guys. So good calls.
Yeah, Stephen Kwan, when you can take Victor Robles a lot later with a very similar profile. Well, I mean, that's a whole episode in itself, but agree. Everybody, thank you for watching. We don't do it often, but do like and subscribe this video. You follow us on our Substack at stackingdingers.com. We're on X at stackingdingers, or on Blue Sky at stackingdingers.com. You can see our our handles there. You can follow us specifically, but our goal this year is to grow the Stacking Dingers accounts, and so yeah, subscribe, follow, all that stuff, and let's grow this game. I already teased it, but yeah, next week we will be having a really fun episode with some really smart Roto Classic Fantasy Baseball content creators to try and prick their brain and try to make us just better baseball analysts in general. So for Billy and myself, have a good one.